Hi, everyone. My name is Jenny, and welcome back to Ampersand. Ampersand is a podcast about the integration of all parts of yourself and how beautiful life is when you do so. Today, I'm incredibly excited to have Ayana on to talk about cacao for the first of what I hope is many series on sacred plant medicines. So a little bit about Ayana first before we dive into the beautiful plant medicine that is cacao. Ayana is a guide, facilitator, visionary, and devoted student of the ancestral shamanic traditions of Mesoamerica and South America, as well as founder of the Ancient Path Collective. As a guide and facilitator, she offers cacao circles rooted in the Mayan teachings of her elders, plant medicine integration, and offers her songs and work with sacred sounds within various plant medicine ceremonies. Her voice and channeled melodies create a safe container for deep transformational shifts. Sound and song is her first and original medicine. As a visionary, she is a bridge between the shamanic and the modern day world, doing this through her music offerings, ceremonies, and retreats through the Ancient Path Collective. She considers herself an apprentice to the great mystery and to life, and is inspired to share the ancestral teachings she comes across and is healed through within community to awaken consciousness and bring deeper healing and understanding to humanity. Thank you so much for coming on, Ayana. It's truly such an honor to have you and to dive into your own experience with cacao and what you have to share with us today.
Yay, thank you for the invitation and for the beautiful introduction.
Of course.
I'm very happy to be here.
Yes. So the primary focus for the audience about this podcast is cacao. Cacao is a beautiful plant medicine that is sacred in so many different Mesoamerican traditions. It is a plant medicine that I've had the honor of really connecting with for a little over a year now, and I'm very much a baby on this path. But for me, I have to say it's just such a beautiful, heart-opening medicine, one that makes me feel really grounded and connected, supported by Mother Earth, and reminds me of the power of really slowing down, connecting with my heart space as the bridge between my mind and my body, and really teaches me the importance of not only connecting deeply with myself, but the power of connecting in community, particularly when it comes to healing. So, Ayana, first things first, I'd love to hear more about who and what cacao is to you, as well as perhaps the history and significance of cacao from the Mayan worldview and Cosmovision.
Firstly, I just have to say everything that you described about cacao is super on point, and I totally share in all of those feelings. And it's what's been really present for me, even though I feel like a baby myself, even, with the medicine of cacao. And it's been, I think I'm almost going on 4 years, like working really deeply with it. But even then, it's just like, I realize that I too am just a baby, and there's so much more to keep learning. But getting to your question, cacao, what is cacao to me? Cacao she's like a best friend, a mother, a guide, an ancestor, a really celestial being that comes from really, really far away, from a very sacred place. And this goes also into the Mayan Cosmovision and the way that cacao is viewed. But from how I've gotten to meet cacao in my own experiences, it's this medicine that carries the wisdom to help us tune into our truth in compassionate and honest ways. I think we all carry so many different facets of ourselves, and some are harder to face than others. And I feel like cacao is one of those medicines that knows how to gently guide you into self-acceptance. And through that self-acceptance, self-empowerment, and through that self-empowerment, more openness to connecting to others. And essentially, that's part of cacao's mission. Cacao's mission is to connect us back to each other. And there's this beautiful prophecy that says that cacao would come back when humanity was ready to heal its heart. And I even get like chills just,
seriously.
saying that, because it's so true. We're in these times where cacao started getting more popular around 2012, and now like you hear about it all the time, right? 11 years later. And you can look around the world and you see like we're lacking connection, and cacao is here to help us reconnect. Cacao is here to help us see each other from the lens of love. And recently I went to visit this cacao farm with an elder who his lineage has been taking care of this farm for like, I think 5 or 6 generations, if I'm not mistaken. So it's been in their lineage for a really long time. And so they have this really deep connection with cacao. And it was this immersion called the spirituality of cacao under the Mayan Cosmovision. And the message that most resounded was the message of community, of support and sustenance between everything, like the importance of everything needing to support each other, and that it's not like about being individualistic, right? Like it's about thinking more for the good of all rather than just like what's good for me. And I think that's one of the most humbling lessons that cacao can teach us, is to stop being so, I guess I can't think of another word right now, but like so narcissistic sometimes, and like really start looking outside of like, oh, how can I be, a light for someone in my day today? And that might look like sitting with your cup of cacao and meditating and getting into a space where you feel centered so that you can show up in that way, in your day to day with your other interactions. But this weaving of connection that cacao teaches us comes from the moment that cacao is planted. It needs a very specific kind of fertile land, really healthy soil. There are specific plants that need to be present, like not just the cacao plant, right? Like there's different kinds of trees that need to be around there, different kinds of herbs, different kinds of animals, different kinds of shades and levels. All of that allows cacao to grow. So in order for us to grow, we also need, all of these support systems so that we too can grow into that strong tree that also gives life and sustenance, and it keeps recycling itself.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing all of that. There's so much of what you said that just gave me chills and really made me feel the support of cacao. And for the audience, I did have some of Cacao's Boundless Beliefs, which is how I know Ayana. I did forget to mention that, but I love what you said about how she reminds us of the importance and power of connection, and reminds us that we are not meant to live these like egocentric lives, which is something that's so common in a lot of Western society, even for, a lot, especially for folks, I think, growing up in the United States, such as myself. And I feel like, to your point, the more I connect with this medicine, the more that I study and learn and remind myself that I'm, forever a student of this path, the more I have a better understanding of concepts like sacred reciprocity, just really understanding the ways in which we're all meant to support each other on this path. And this actually reminds me of something that I read on Cacao's website about how cacao plays a central role in the cycles of life, death, and rebirth. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, definitely. Actually, I wrote that.
I thought so. I got it probably.
Yeah. So I actually shared this, I think a few weeks ago during one of the cacao circles, and that you come to, I think that we met through, right? Mm-hmm. That cacao is actually a plant that is known to come from the underworld, which can be surprising to some, right? Like, like a lot of people, like even what I said, right? Like cacao is a celestial being, but the fact that it has to go into the underworld, right? Down into the earth, into the soil, in order for it to grow like strong, starts to already tell us this story of us needing to go into our own depth in order to become reborn. And in that rebirth of who we're becoming, we start to create new life. And so it can be as simple as that when it comes to you know, cacao's teaching about life, death, life cycle. This is just from my own personal practice with cacao, of like how I was saying, it really helps you go into those parts that are a little bit more uncomfortable in a really loving and softer way. And by going into those spaces, we are actually able to create new perceptions of ourselves. So a part of ourself dies so that a new part of ourself can be born, so that we can create a new life outside. It all feeds each other. And cacao is this plant, this sacred plant that is used when children are born for a blessing, because it's a celebration of life. And when someone passes, when someone moves on to the other side, it is also worked with, because it is a celebration of life, and it is a celebration of the fact that they've, in a way, graduated, right, from this incarnation, and now they're moving on to something else. And so I think just even in looking at those traditions and the way that cacao is used for the celebration of a new birth, and also for the honoring of someone's life once it's come to a close, we can already see where cacao is showing us about life, death, and rebirth, and everything that comes with it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, the ways in which it's really used and revered to celebrate the birth of new children, the passing on of others, and really celebrating and honoring the lives that they lived on this physical plane and in this incarnation, as well as relate to what you said before, right, about the ways in which she shows us with compassion what may be within the depths of our being that needs to be healed, such that we can shed light on that part in a new way and, you know, transform in some way. And that actually segues me to a question around the ways in which cacao has, you know, allowed you to, with compassion, explore certain parts of yourself.
Yeah, this is great, because I was already like wanting to share this part. Yeah. So my journey with cacao actually started when I was having these like terrible panic attacks that would last me like 3-4 hours at a time. And like, I would literally be on the floor, like feeling like I was dying. Like my body was in shock a lot. And I'm not the one to like go and look for allopathic medicine. I try to look to nature first. And so I started going with this mentor, and she did this Reiki session on me one of these days. And afterwards we like sat down to chat. And I remember during this Reiki session, I had this like vision out of nowhere, you know, in the meditative state that I was in, of these ancestors dressed in white, like over my body. And they were like doing healing over my chest, because most of the anxiety was centered around my heart. And I didn't mention it to her, but then she was like, oh, by the way, like, your ancestors say that cacao is going to help you, so start drinking cacao. And I was kind of like, huh, that's interesting. And I hadn't ever really had like a strong connection to cacao, even though, like, you know, I lived part of my life in Guatemala and most of my family is from there. It wasn't really something that was like super present within my family. And so for me, I was like, well, it's chocolate, so I guess it like doesn't hurt to try. You know, it just seemed like a very friendly thing to go into. And so she gifted me some cacao, and then I ended up finding Aura's ceremonies. This is when I wasn't working there or anything. And I started going there, but then like every day, like something, like literally the plant itself just told me like, drink me every day and make space for me, like make space for me to be with you, for you to be with me. And so I just remember every single day, like every single maybe morning, afternoon. This was during the pandemic too, so you know, we a lot of us had time at home. I would prepare myself, you know, probably like 20 grams of cacao, and which was plenty for me because I'm pretty sensitive. And at first it was actually kind of scary because I would start to go into my anxiety and like the symptoms of my body when I would drink the cacao. But something in me, I think like the intelligence of my intuition was like, it's not the cacao. Cacao is helping you to feel it in a safe place, in a safe way. And so I started being able to like actually feel where the anxiety was in my body and like move it around and cry it out and write it out. And all of this was when I was drinking the cacao, and I could feel cacao like clearly guiding me into feeling everything that was causing me to have that anxiety and those panic attacks. Like it really started to reveal the habits and the patterns and the relationships that were causing me to be in this state. And interestingly enough, there was this moment I remember I was dating someone at the time and we were living together, and we went to the beach and I decided to take my cacao with me there, and I drank it and I just laid down. And all of a sudden I had this vision of a knife stabbing me in the heart, and I started getting a bunch of anxiety, and I was like, whoa, what was that? And then like a week later we broke up. Wow. And it ended up becoming this really big dramatic thing that I then realized, though, as soon as we broke up, my anxiety and panic attacks went away. So like, I'm like, oh, cacao was telling me like, hey, this relationship is affecting you and is out of alignment with you, which is why you're holding on to these emotions, because you're not willing to say what you feel, or you're not willing to express yourself the way that feels natural to you. And so she really helped me take responsibility for my actions and my decisions and my, I would say my insistence on staying. Mm-hmm. And then she kind of showed me like, okay, no, take your power back. This is something that you have decided, but in a way that I didn't feel like, oh, like terrible about myself or anything like that. It was like, okay, thank you for showing me what was happening and the choices that I was making. And now I can move forward in a new way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's incredible. Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that story and sharing the ways in which she really showed you the ways in which like this relationship wasn't serving you, and taught you how you could empower yourself and how you could really kind of leave this and come home to yourself. I think mm-hmm. it's so beautiful too, hearing about the ways in which she was already nudging you in certain directions from the very beginning. It seems like you were also very much open to receiving as a student. And I think it's just so important. I want to pause there for the audience and just acknowledge the importance of like being a receptive student such as yourself. So thank you so much for that reminder. I am curious, at the beginning, can you describe the ways in which you would receive messages from cacao and how she would, guide you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it has to do with what you were just saying right now that I think is important, is this receptivity, right? I think one of the, I guess we could say, mistakes that we sometimes make when we're wanting to connect with a plant is coming from a place of, I want it to do this to me.
Yeah.
Right? Like we think like, I'm going to take this and it's going to do this to me. Okay. And you just are like waiting for it to do something to you. But that's not really how it works with the plants. Like it has to be a relationship where you sometimes literally, I would say always, you have to say to it, hey, I'm here and this is what I'm looking for. And I'm open to receiving whatever it is that you have for me. And so from that space, from that relational space, right? Because it's like with a person, you're not going to just like show up and just stand there and wait for them to like do something for you. You're going to have a conversation,
right?
So that there can be agreements between the two of you. Mm-hmm. And it's the same thing with all plants, and it's the same thing with cacao. And so there was definitely very much this practice of speaking to the plant. Like every time, and to this day, every time I sit with cacao, I present myself. I sometimes will let it know like what's going on in my life, even though I know cacao already knows. There's something to like putting a voice to it. Mm. And then I'll say my prayer And sometimes it's just like, I'm just here today to give gratitude for the sustenance that you give me in my own life and the health that you help me to sustain. And I think because of that, I was receptive. And so the messages and the ways in which I was receiving them were very, and are usually still very intuitive. I think the language of the plants is very subtle, especially with a plant like cacao. It's not always going to be like really obvious where you like, you know, hear something in your mind, or you suddenly have like this vision, or there's not going to be like some big voice that that speaks to you in a very obvious way. They're going to be very subtle ways. And so you have to be observant and like start training your own way of noticing the subtleties. And so these messages that I was receiving from cacao would come in the form of, when I would journal, I would literally just start journaling without stopping. And then there would come a point where I could tell it wasn't really me. Like there was something I was writing that wasn't me. And that was really loving and nourishing. And it was this voice that was a little bit wiser than my current self at that time. And I could feel that it was cacao. Someone could maybe say like, oh, well, maybe it was your higher self. But in my experience, I could feel that it was cacao sending me that message. Or sometimes it would come to me through dreams, dreams that I started having after I started working with cacao. Sometimes it came through song. Like if I was drinking my cacao and suddenly there was a song that had a specific lyric that had a message that I needed, I knew that was cacao's message for me. So you just have to be open to like really observing what's going on in your surroundings. And this is what the elders teach us. This is what part of what we have to get back to as a humanity, is like knowing how to observe the subtleties of like, you know, if you, let's say you start singing a song that you're dedicating, I don't know, to the water, and suddenly birds start singing. You can either not notice that and think it's just a coincidence, or if you're open to the subtlety, you know that that is the response of the energies listening to your song and receiving it. So it's not always going to be super obvious. You have to be open to observing. You have to have all your senses open so that these messages can start coming through. And it's a practice. And you know, it goes up and down. Sometimes I'm like, wow, I'm not receiving anything right now. And then other times I'm super open to receiving it.
Yeah. I really appreciate the reminder there to just keep all of our senses open to the ways in which cacao, or even other like plant medicines, or even just like teachers more broadly, right? Just show us the way and teach us what we need to know, what we most need to receive at each point in time. And even going back to what you're saying around the ways in which you like speak your intentions to the cup, it sounds like a much more powerful and potent way of engaging with cacao versus, it sounds like, for just like silently kind of sharing that intention. And can you tell us a little bit more about like the power of voice specifically?
Yeah. Well, it's already scientifically proven that sound affects matter, right? And you can see this with, I forget this guy's name. He's a Japanese scientist. I'll try to find it, and then maybe you can put it in the show notes. But there's this experiment that he did with sound and water. And I think he put 3 jars of rice, and each one had like a different phrase on it. One was negative, one was neutral, and then one was positive. And then every day he would speak the message to the rice, and it had water. And by the end, the one that was negative, well, it was rotted, like it had mold and all these things. The one that was neutral, well, it was just kind of like sad. It didn't really have life. And then the one that had the positive, you know, affirmations being spoken to it was completely healthy, and like absolutely nothing happened to the rice. So just right there, if we want to look at it from a more scientific way, we can see that sound directly affects matter. And plants, they're these live beings, right? So the essence of cacao, even though it's now the plant turned into paste, turned to a drink, the essence of cacao is in here. And so it's still listening. And it's made with water typically, right? So if you want to make it in a traditional way, you're going to prepare it with some water. And so that water in there is going to receive whatever you say to it. And then whatever you say to it, you're going to be ingesting that. And then your body is going to receive it. So that's why I think it's important to actually speak into your cup of cacao or even over your food, right? Because that vibration is going to affect that matter. And then that matter is going to affect your own matter.
Yeah.
And there's something really beautiful about just like allowing yourself to flow and to take the mind out of it, right? Like start connecting back into your heart. That's what cacao does. It like helps us drop down from the mind and into the heart, into the intelligence of the heart. And I know it can be hard at first. I had someone that I was guiding on their own relationship with cacao at one point, and I started having her do the practice. I told her every day that you sit with your cacao, say an invocation, and she wanted to have like this whole outline of how to do it, and like, oh, well, what words do I need to use? How long does it need to be? And I was like, you know what? Some days it can literally be thank you. Like if that's what's coming from your heart, that's more than enough. And then some days it's going to be this whole long, beautiful web of things. But as long as it's spoken from the heart, the cacao is going to feel that, and the cacao is going to give that back to you as well.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense, and actually reminds me of the ways in which I have sometimes found myself being like, I have to have this really long invocation every day where I invoke not only, of course, the spirit of cacao, but, you know, the different earthly elements, my spirit guides. And sometimes I find myself feeling overwhelmed and not wanting to say an invocation. So I appreciate the reminder that sometimes, or oftentimes when it is truly just spoken from the heart, something as simple as thank you is enough.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we don't need to make it all extravagant. I mean, these plants feel our intentions more than they hear our words. So if we're just doing something out of like needing to check, okay, I invoked the elements. Okay, I called upon my spirit guides. Check. Okay, I am, you know, it's like the heart isn't there. The mind is there.
That's so true.
We're very good at the mind thing, right? So
Yes.
like cacao is like, come back into the heart. Come back into the heart. What does the heart need to say today? And it could even be a sigh, like, you know, but you feel it, like you feel it, and the cup feels it, and it all starts to feed each other.
Yeah, that's so true. From here, I'd love you to talk to us a little bit more about dosage. I know from learning from you and all the wonderful resources that you've written, that, you know, there can be like, you know, smaller and lighter kind of daily doses as well as ceremonial doses. Can you tell the audience about how you might like how you even determine like what the right dosage is, how often you might want to do ceremonial dosages, as well as maybe particular forms of cacao you might be drawn to?
Yeah. So the daily recommended dose that one can have, let's say, because you can have cacao. It's a safe plant medicine that is really gentle on the body when you have it in small amounts. I now say, because I'm learning new things, right? 13 grams is a good amount for a daily dose. And if you're wanting to go a little bit deeper, to do something a little bit more meditational, then you would go into 20 grams. This is like when you have more time to dedicate to your own practices and to connecting with the spirit of cacao. If you're going to do like a longer meditation, I would say like if you're going to spend an hour, then you can do the 20. And then a ceremonial dose would be considered anywhere from 30 to 40 grams. Some people say 50 grams. Honestly, I think that's way too much for the body. It can be pretty strong, a little bit heavy on the liver. And depending on your sensitivity, it can cause headaches or jitters and kind of leave you a little bit too open. But this is just based off of what I've been learning. And recently, with this elder that I was sharing that I was with, he was like, those people who drink 50 grams, I don't know, they're crazy. He's like, they're crazy. I would never drink that amount. And I was like, oh, okay, that's interesting. Like, yeah, I've always thought that was a lot too, but like, it's interesting to hear it from someone that works with this plant, like as a living, like they do this every single day. They've been working with this plant from their whole lineage. And so what I loved about being in that space was observing that cacao is consumed all day, but it's consumed in really small amounts. So it's this thing that gives you sustained energy and sustained connection. Like in the mornings, they'll have like their warm pozole, which is cacao with corn. And it's a little bit more corn than it is cacao, but the cacao is still present. And then in the afternoons, they might have like the cacao water, the cacahuada, from the actual pulp. And then in the nighttime, they'll have iced cacao. Like they'll have cold cacao, but it's like very small amount of cacao with water and the ice. So you're not like ingesting huge amounts of cacao all day. It's just enough to keep you connected to the plant, connected to the spirit. And when they do have their sessions with cacao where they're drinking higher amounts, they will definitely take up the dosage, but it's a very dedicated time to like actually sitting within a circle and having conversation and being around the fire and having the altar present. That's when they'll drink the higher amounts of cacao.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's been this whole concept between like daily, meditational, and ceremonial. For me personally, I'm currently in a state of shifting. My relationship to those different dosages. And I thought it was interesting. I started doing 13 grams of cacao earlier this year, well, a few months ago. And right now, when I was at the land with all the cacao trees and whatnot, that's when they said like, 13 grams is what we recommend daily. And I was like, oh, interesting. Like intuitively. So see, like that's a message from cacao. Intuitively, I was already starting to serve myself that much because it's what felt good for me. And then I received that confirmation. I was like, oh, cacao was already guiding me in that way. And now the confirmation has arrived.
Yeah. I appreciate you sharing that. It's really interesting even thinking about my own relationship to the different dosages, because I feel like when I first started connecting with it last year, I think I got it in my head that I had to have more to feel more of the effects. But I think this then goes to what we were talking about, in which case I don't think I was as open to the subtle as I am now. And I've noticed I've titrated downwards from a daily dose perspective. And even a ceremonial dose. I do remember trying out 50 grams at some point for a ceremonial dose, also realizing it was way too much for me, and realizing, I mean, that's one of the ways I've continued to learn from cacao is through the dosages and my own experience, and the ways in which she teaches me that oftentimes going slow and going subtle is the most sustainable way forward. So I appreciate also just getting that confirmation from you. So I actually want to try like a smaller daily dosage.
Yeah, and I even invite you to, like, when you sit with that smaller daily dosage, like, to still have that deep intentionality between, like, what you're, perhaps, like, what you're invoking when you're going to sit with that cup of cacao. Because I think what, like, left me so, it's so funny because this is, like, an epiphany I've had so many times, like, for the past 5 years, but it still amazes me every time that I like receive it again. But it's just like the power of like a prayer and intention will absolutely like potentialize the whatever medicine you're working with like tenfold. So I can tell, like if sometimes I'm like, okay, well, today my body's feeling a little bit more sensitive. So I think I'm just going to sit with 7 grams, right? Like sometimes I'll drop down to like 7 grams and have like a more watery cacao. It's still yummy, but if I like sit long enough in meditation when I'm setting my intention and I'm like very conscious about it when I'm drinking it, it'll feel like I had like 20 grams and I'm like, whoa, like this is crazy, you know? And this is what happened when I was with this group of people. Like we didn't have like an official cacao sit down until our last day. But every day that we were together, I felt like I had like 30, 40 grams of cacao. And I had probably had like, I don't know, like a handful of cacao beans, you know, but it was because of all that energy that we were creating together through our community sharing, through the laughter, through the joy, through the music, through just having the smell of cacao around us and touching the beans and being around the trees. Like just that was like receiving the medicine. And I think that's one of the things that we can learn, not just from cacao, but from the plants in general, is that we don't always have to ingest them in order to feel them in our bodies or to hear them or to come to know them.
I love that. I think that's truly such a beautiful reminder about the ways in which we can connect deeply, not only with cacao, but with other plants, whether or not, you know, they are master plants, or even just connecting with Mother Earth and the other beings here. And that leads me to I guess wonder more about the ways in which like cacao may have surprised you.
The most recent surprise has been the way in which she can help us connect to our inner child and to joy. Like I tend to, I'm pretty silly. Like when you get close to me, like I can get pretty silly, but in general, I can also take myself pretty seriously and like all the inner work that I do and all these things. Right. And so I sometimes forget like to nourish that inner child. And, lately I've just been feeling like when I've been sitting with cacao throughout my days, I can feel how right now she's like asking me to give way to like the little one in me and like her silliness, and to not just reserve it for like those closest to her, but rather to just be silly when it feels right, like when it comes out naturally. And so I've been observing myself like, oh, I'm a lot more silly around people I don't even know. Like I'll make jokes out of nowhere, even though I like just met them, you know, if it's the cashier at the grocery store or like the driver in my Uber. I've just been noticing it's like starting to come out a lot more, and I can feel it's like this joy molecule inside of me is like bouncing around and like ready to go and just wants to bring joy. And I'm also just amazed at the amount of connection that cacao can help us create when we sit in circle, when we sit in community. And I think it's ironic, right? Because it's like it's been years now that I've been like hosting these circles and being in community weekly, but like it still like hits me so hard in a good way when I start to feel how open my heart is to other people that are within like that same vibration of love and joy. And, you know, I just end up leaving being like, I just want to love everybody. I just want to love everybody and be kind to everybody. And this is something that like, what I love about this is that it starts to go into all parts of your life. Like not just when you're drinking cacao, like this is a value that cacao can help you come into contact with. And once you're in touch with that in your everyday life, it starts to become expressed, and you're going to be kinder to people. You're going to be a little bit more patient. You're going to have a little bit more laughter and more openness when you're out in the world. And this is what I love about cacao is that value of being open to community and connection and to honesty, I'd say, with each other.
Yeah. That just really, really hit me there in this beautiful way in which, I feel like that is really something I've learned from cacao as well. And just even what you're speaking about, how that feeling, that embodiment of love is really amplified when we sit with others in community. I feel that every time I sit in community with or cacao, and even with like friends that I'm guiding or friends that I'm sitting with, I do remember this one particular moment in which, oh my gosh, the love I not only felt emanating from myself, but from her, it just felt like it created this virtuous cycle, and just like we were just beaming this love. And you're so right. I just like want to love on everybody. I just want to love on everybody. And I also think about the ways in which, even expanding upon what you're saying, the ways in which my own definition and understanding of love have expanded. Like, love for me is no longer just love between a man and a woman or just romantic love. It is the highest form of vibration, the highest form of self-expression to me, and a value that I hold and cherish very deeply. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing that, and for sharing the ways in which cacao has continue to remind you of that, as well as get you in touch with your inner child and your sense of joy. I think that's so incredible to hear.
Yeah. And I think also, one thing I want to add to that it has been surprising me with, or reminding me, is the fact that we're not supposed to walk this journey alone. And I think this goes back to what we were talking about, like at the beginning, about not living these egocentric lives, but like rather allowing our view to expand as well to all our brothers and sisters that are around us constantly. And there's just something so magical that happens when you allow yourself to be held in community, and you allow yourself to hold in community and to be in those kinds of spaces. I think we can start to really learn and integrate the fact that like each one of us has something absolutely beautiful and unique to share. And I think when we're in more of an egocentric state of mind, we can sometimes fall into competition or self-criticism, things along those lines. But if we open up just a little bit to the possibility that if we can be allied with another, we're actually going to become stronger. And then when we start feeling ourselves becoming stronger, we're actually going to want the other person to become stronger. And then it's just like this beautiful domino effect. And that's one of the, I think, most beautiful things that cacao has been bringing to the surface for me is like the importance of elevating each other. And that when we do that, we can all shine without feeling like one is more than the other. And that's what cacao shows us, right? Cacao shows us that like everything has equal importance. That's why it's important, like to go, I know it's not easy for everyone to go to a cacao farm. If you have the opportunity, I like totally do it, because it's going to totally blow your mind open to the magic of cacao in ways that I can't even put into words yet. But if you go into these spaces of nature or cacao farm, you see how every single little plant, animal, rock, mushroom, and person are equally important in this plant's ability to grow and to give. Like nothing is less than the other. And when we look at that in nature, we can also start looking at that in ourselves and in our way of connecting with each other.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. Yeah, I love what you were saying about how she teaches us about the importance of every little being, like, the trees, the plants, the fungi, the people that are involved at every stage in the process. And I really, truly hope one day that I can go to a cacao farm and really connect with the medicine in that way. I feel like that sounds like truly such a special opportunity. Before we dive into our practice with you, I am curious about two other things. One, I am wondering, I think you mentioned this actually in your blog post, but I'm curious what other teachers, plant, human, or otherwise, cacao has opened your heart to, and even potentially like synergies between cacao and other medicines or practices that you've incorporated into your life?
You know, what's interesting is that I actually started my path with like the big plant, plant masters, like the stronger ones. So it was actually like ayahuasca that led me to cacao. It was actually Wachuma that led me to cacao. And then from there, cacao has helped me to integrate a lot of the things that I learned with some of these plants that I work with. And so, yeah, because for me, I was like, if I'm going to go into this, I'm going to go big. so I went really big. And it was completely life-changing. And I feel like, even I think for me, ayahuasca has been one of my biggest teachers on this medicine path. And I don't know, if it hadn't been for ayahuasca, I don't know how I would have gotten to cacao. I'm sure I would have eventually because of how popular it is now. But I can clearly trace that my whole journey with that medicine is what led me to having to turn to cacao, because ayahuasca being a plant that uncovers so much, right? And if you don't have the guidance or the tools in order to integrate what it starts to uncover, it can kind of go against, it can go against you. There's also this shadow part of the things that can happen with plants if you don't have the right, the right support systems in order to integrate what they're teaching you. And that's kind of what happened to me. It was just a lot of stuff came up for me, and that led to some of the things that started causing the anxiety and the panic attacks. It wasn't ayahuasca. It was the things that were already within me that got uncovered and that, surfaced. But then that led me to having to turn to cacao. So I'm once I got to this point of getting through all of that tough stuff, I was able to be like, oh, okay, thank you. Right. But of course, during I was like, oh my God, what is happening?
Yeah.
Yeah. And the other thing I will say that for me, I always love to call cacao my door opener. And I think cacao is a door opener for many of us. Many people have a really intimate relationship with her. I think, at least that I've spoken to, have also felt this way, is that this is a medicine that catalyzes change, but in really beautiful and gentle ways, I'd say. And so for me, cacao is what led me to being able to have a job that was online, that allowed me to come to Mexico to then start to the point where I was like, oh, well, absolutely no one knows me here. I feel a little bit more comfortable in sharing this medicine outside of virtual circles. And so I started sharing it in person. And then that led me to meeting, one of my biggest teachers in the Mayan lineage that I purposely moved to Mexico to in order to up the chances of me meeting him.
Totally. Yeah.
It was totally, directed that way. And then that led me to meeting him, to meeting other people, to it just keeps going and going and going and going. And I know it's because of the work that I've gotten to do with this beautiful medicine. And of course, my own personal journey outside of that as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I so hear you. And I so relate to you in terms of ayahuasca also being the reason why I found cacao. Very similar to you, I had a number of dark nights of the soul, especially after my retreat in Iquitos in 2022. And I didn't have many people to turn to. And I knew I felt called to connect with plant medicines, ideally ones that were empathogenic or, legal and much more accessible in the States. And I just remember a friend casually mentioning cacao, and I just felt something. I knew that I was meant to pursue this path. And so I really hear you in the ways in which ayahuasca and Wachuma have led you to cacao, and how she's just been so supportive in opening certain doors and supporting you. And it sounds like putting one foot in front of the other, pursuing this path, moving to Mexico, meeting with and learning from one of your great Mayan elders. I love that so much. And I think it just goes to show the ways in which sometimes life teaches us to slow down and embrace the subtleties of like medicines like cacao versus all day, every day, like connecting with medicines like ayahuasca, which like I've definitely been there. And I feel like I'm realizing the ways in which life is truly like finding that balance between going all in with those very powerful teachers versus working with more like subtle and gentle teachers.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you said, one step in front of the other. And there's this saying I say to myself, I've never shared it with anyone, but like on days where I'm like feeling like, oh, I don't want to do this, or there's something that I know I want to do, but like I'm feeling a little scared. When I make my cacao, I'm like, okay, this is my cacao courage instead of liquid courage. So that's my prayer. I'm like, all right, to wake up the courage in me to keep moving forward. And that's one of, I think, cacao's other medicines is like helping us to feel the courage to keep moving forward, especially in these dark night of the soul kind of moments. And that's why I think she's such a ally to integration, because sometimes these other, really powerful entheogenic plants can bring us into dark night of the soul moments. And with the help of an ally like cacao, we can process it a little bit more gently and lovingly.
Yeah, I so agree. And then I guess segueing more into the practical component, I would love for you to share a little bit more about the synergy between music and cacao. I know you already talked about just the power of just vocalizing and vibrations, but I know from what I've learned from you that cacao loves music.
Yeah, cacao, and I think all plants love music. It's if you really look around at like these ancestral traditions and the way that they do ceremony, music is always there. It's like if there's no music, it's like there's no ceremony. There has to be music present. And it goes back to the importance of vibration, right? Because it starts to actually like create an ambiance, and it starts to wake up the spirit of the plant through the different melodies and through the different sounds. So that's like on one side, the way that I've really gotten to enjoy connecting to music in a new way. I've done music, my whole life. I've been singing since I was like 4. And so when I found this connection between spirituality and singing, I was like, oh, this is absolutely amazing. Like, because I always had this perception that I had to keep the two separate. But then when I started to see that they were components that actually went hand in hand, it felt really good. And so I started to explore that through, with other plant medicines like ayahuasca and wachuma, obviously with the Icaros and those things. And so because of my time spent studying that, I kind of intuitively transitioned that into my own practices with cacao. And so my invocations would end up turning into like an Icaro for cacao that I could feel clearly was this language that we could understand between each other. And that sometimes the Icaro would be coming from me. And then sometimes when I would drink the medicine, then the Icaro starts coming because of the inspiration that the medicine helps me open up to. And I think that cacao is one of those allies that can help us open to our creativity and to the fertility that we all hold. No matter the gender, we all have this fertility and this creative power inside of us. And cacao, awakening that inner child, that joy, it really invites us to explore what that means. And so I've really, connected to it in that way of like exploring my own sound and the melodies that want to come through when I'm with cacao. Personally, like one of my practices that I've had now for the past 2 years has been to drink my cacao before and or during my sessions when I'm sitting down and making and writing music. Like that's like always my go-to. I have my little ritual with my cacao, and then I go upstairs and I start producing. and cacao is right there next to me, because for me, I feel like when I'm drinking it, I'm also allowing myself to create from an open heart rather than from the analytical mind, especially because I'm working on a computer and on keyboards and synths and things like that. It can be very, very cerebral. Mm-hmm. And so it helps me ground back down into my heart, so that the music can come from there. And I think we all naturally, I mean, I have yet to meet someone that's like, I absolutely hate singing. Like, I usually just hear people say like, oh, I can't sing, I'm shy, I don't want to. But I've never heard someone like say they hate it. And I think it's because naturally we all have a voice, right? We all have an expression. And so when we allow ourselves to express that in a non-judgmental way, it can become pure medicine for our bodies. It can literally relax us and help us activate our parasympathetic nervous system and get into expanded states of consciousness if we concentrate long enough. And it can be a way of meditation, because, you know, meditation doesn't always have to be closing your eyes and being in silence. It can also be toning and making a sound for a certain amount of time. And that's something I've actually been exploring a lot more right now in my morning practice with cacao. I've been exploring this clue that one of my teachers gave me around tuning into the energies of the nawals. Within the Mayan Cosmovision, the nawals, for anyone that doesn't know what they are, they're essentially like the 20 faces, the 20 expressions of God, of the divine, whatever you wish to call it, the creator. These are all different expressions that are present within nature and present within us. And so each day we're accompanied by a different one through different cycles. And that's why each day teaches us something different, brings in different energies. And sometimes it might be a little bit harder than others. And that all has to do with even deeper things that have to do with your own essence and your own energy and how it interacts with each of these nawals. But to not get into that, what I've been exploring is how to connect to these energies through sound and through mantra. And so I've been doing it through vowel sounding. And I don't know if you've heard this, but it's a practice that's done in different lineages, where if there's a word, let's say you want to activate, let's see, something like love, you would only speak the vowel sound. You will only sound the vowel sound. So I guess in that case, it would be like, but in that way, you start to bring that vibration into the space. And so what I've been doing is doing it with the name of that energy, the name of the nawal. I work with the vowel sound to start connecting from a space that's not coming from my mind, but rather from my intuition and from my heart. So that's been really interesting, and I'm hoping to at some point share these practices with people as well, so that they can feel that connection that we all have the ability to have.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing your practice, and I really appreciate you letting people know that they don't have to necessarily have years of experience or have also been singing since age 4 to really connect deeply with the medicine. Sometimes it is about just toning. And I know something that I've been starting to practice is like toning like the Bij mantra for the heart chakra. And that's just been a beautiful way for me to like drop from my head into my heart space. So I love the ways in which you're also reminding us that meditation need not look a certain way, need not be sitting on your yoga mat, eyes closed. It can be working alongside a companion, an ally who's supporting you in really tapping into your intuition. So I really appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah, totally. My pleasure.
Of course. So now I want to turn it over to you to lead us through a practice to really connect with cacao.
Okay, sweet. So actually, I wanted to share the practice for today with the energy that is accompanying us today. Even if someone is hearing this on another day, it doesn't matter. It can still be an energy that's activated. And so today we're being accompanied by the energy of Ahau, which is the energy of the sun. It's the energy of that sacred vital force inside of us that keeps us walking forward. It's the strength, and it's a day to ask for clearing away any obstacles on our path that keep us from our purpose, and to awaken that vital energy that keeps us moving forward. And so the intention behind this practice that I'm going to share is to call upon that within your life. So if there's anything that you are feeling you wish to clear so that you can move forward, you can intend it in that way. Or if you already know what you're wanting to go towards, then you can use it in order to give more strength to that intention so that there can be more action behind it. So just taking a moment to close our eyes and take a deep breath together, breathing in through the nose and sighing it out through the mouth. One more time, in through the nose, out through the mouth, in through the nose, and out through the mouth. And if it feels good and comfortable for you in this moment, you can place your hands on your heart and just continue to allow your breathing to be calm and relaxed, natural, as we tune into the energy of the sun, the energy of the divine warrior who is clear on their purpose, on their mission, on their values. As we call upon and feel into the energy of loving action, inspired action. As we call upon courage and vitality, so that with this courage and vitality fortified within us, we can move forward in new and expansive ways. And so we're going to do a little freestyle mantra. I'm going to just share the way in which I work with the sound. And so today's energy is ahpu. So our vowels are au. You may choose to just listen or freestyle along with me. And we'll just do this for a few moments. Giving thanks to the sacred force that accompanies us today and always within our being. Giving thanks to the courage, the strength, and the vitality of our spirits that keep us here, present, and in this moment. Thank you to the medicine and to the spirit of cacao, to all its guardians, to the ancestors, and to the great celestial wisdom that this medicine carries and that unites us and brings us into honest and loving connection. Taking another deep breath in. And as you exhale slowly, you can open your eyes.
Wow, that was such a beautiful improvisational practice. Ayana, thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. That it means so much for you to share your gifts and your learnings and the beautiful toning that you shared with us. Truly, thank you so much.
With all my love, and thank you for creating this space and for having me here.
Of course. Before we close, where can folks get in touch with you, learn more about you, and connect with your offerings and your energy?
So you can connect with me via Instagram. My personal account is at Serpent Ayana. And I have my project that I'm really excited about called the Ancient Path Collective, which you can also find on Instagram, which is ancientpath.co. I have an offering that I'm really looking forward to coming up in February, in which it will be a 7-day immersion with 3 incredible indigenous guides that work with Mesoamerican wisdom. And so we'll get to be learning with them, healing with them, and connecting in community. And we'll be sharing a lot of practices like what I shared today, and you'll be receiving direct wisdom from the elders, which for me is an absolute joy and privilege to be able to open that to more people, because I think it's a beautiful opportunity for all of us to have that in our lives and to have that guidance and support. And you can also find me on Spotify as Ayana. I have a few songs on there, and I'm really looking forward to January, where I'll be releasing my first fully produced project.
Oh, that's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. And thank you again so much for coming on, sharing your own connection with cacao, and really helping me and the audience tap into our connection with cacao and the power of leading with an open heart.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Of course.